Hello and welcome to Mirror Fighting One to Watch. I'm Rich Jones and today I'm joined by Jonathan Kumuteo, one of Frank Warren's prospects who's awaiting his pro debut after battling a rare skin condition to turn professional. So yeah, Jonathan, just wanted to sort of go back to the beginning really. So you were born in Zaire at the time, Democratic Republic of Congo now, and yeah, then you were sort of 6, 7 years old, was it, when you moved to the UK? Tell us a little bit about those early experiences you had.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't really remember my time in Congo because we actually moved to Zambia in 2000 due to the civil war that was, going on in Congo at the time. So I do remember my last few days in Zambia very vaguely. It's almost like a dream now. But I mean, all I really remember was, going to school out there and just, in a sense, always playing. I don't have any negative recollections of Africa as such. So, but it's been a very long time. I haven't been to Congo since I left in 2000. So I'm very interested to go back once this pandemic is over.
Yeah, and just tell us the story of how you ended up in the UK as well. I think you were only young when you sort of got put on a plane and yeah, over to London it was.
Yeah, well, it was March 2003, coming up 18 years in a month next month. And literally, my mom woke me up in the early morning, middle of the night, and she literally told me, Jonathan, you're going to live in London with your dad. And literally, she took me to the airport, put me on a plane on my own, and here I am, 18 years later.
Yeah, what was it like sort of acclimatizing to life in London? I imagine your life sort of changed overnight. What was it like when you arrived? And do you remember sort of the first few days when you got here?
Yeah, it's funny because it happened so quick. I didn't really get a chance to really like take it in, if that makes sense. But one thing I definitely remember was when I was on the plane, because I was on my own, I couldn't go to the toilet and I needed to go to the toilet, right? And the previous time when I had been on a plane, the toilet made so much noise. So this time around, I was so scared. I literally like tried to sleep the whole journey. And then, when I got to the airport, I was going to, the air hostess was walking me um, to collections to meet my dad. And we were walking so much and for so long, I felt like he didn't come to get me. And then I thought maybe I wouldn't know or recognize him because I'd only really seen him in pictures, if that made sense, because he moved over to the UK just when I was 2 years old. So then when I finally saw him, it was like a huge relief and I literally recognized him straight away. And then my first 3 days, they were very different, but I don't know how I really reacted to it, if that made sense. And also because I already spoke English before I came to the UK, I didn't think it was like a very difficult transition, if that made sense.
Yeah, and you, I think you sort of quite early on was it you sort of joined the cadets, and I know you mentioned to me before the cadets were quite a big part of your life, sort of growing up. Just tell me a bit about how you ended up going there and how that sort of shaped your childhood. You seem to have good memories of that when we spoke previously.
Yeah, so when I came to the UK, I was living in North London, Colindale, and then I went to a school called Orion Primary School, which is in Colindale. And then one day, the Sea Cadets came to do a presentation at school, and then that really got my attention. And then I remember going home and asking my dad, can he take me to cadets? And then he didn't know what it was either. He took me down, and it was very intriguing to say the least. It was something very different. We were kind of used to just playing sport, and I tried it out for a few months. It was weird at first, but I really came to like it and appreciate it a lot. And I still do. There's only two things I've ever wanted to be in life. One was to be an admiral of the fleet in the Royal Navy, which is, looking back, is aiming really, really high because, there's not many at all. and to be a professional boxer. However, I actually didn't know that you can be a boxer whilst you're in the Navy. So, I should have thought about that.
Yeah, and you say you moved over to be with your dad, who I think you said before was who was studying here. Is that right? And then when did your mom came and joined you a few years later? Is that right? Did she
Yeah.
come over here
So,
a few years later?
yeah. So I think it was about 3 or so years later, my mum finally joined us. And yeah, I mean, it was very different because I went from just living with my mum to now living with my dad. But the transition happened so much. I guess I was just very versatile. I adjusted very quickly. So, you know, I it was different, but it was also great. But before I came to the UK, I actually watched BBC News all the time. So, I was familiar with pretty much just Parliament, Big Ben, and a few programs. Other than that, I remember coming and it snowed in 2004, and I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah. And when did you discover boxing then? When did the boxing journey start? When did you first set foot in the boxing gym, and how did that come about?
Yeah, so initially I watched Mayweather versus Hatton. That was actually probably one of my first proper fights that I did watch. And then I still wasn't really interested in the sport. It wasn't until David Haye boxed Valuev for the heavyweight title. That's when I really tapped in like, okay, oh wow, you know, this is very interesting to say the least. But I still wasn't a fan, if that made sense. And then it wasn't until a few of my friends from school kept on challenging me to go down to the boxing gym and spar them. And at first, I really wasn't interested because, I was scared of going home to black eye, a bruised face, and then, what my mum would say to that. Because, I always had to face my mum when I got home, if that made sense. So, and coming from a strict background, I just felt as though my mum wouldn't approve, if that makes sense. So it took a little bit of encouragement, but I finally went down when I moved to an area called Barnet, and one of my neighbors turned out to be a boxer. So then I said, you know what, I'm going to go down. It was September 2011, and I literally felt at home as soon as I entered Finchley ABC, and it was like, wow, I'm home. And it was love at first sight.
Yeah, obviously a pretty famous boxing gym now because of obviously everything Anthony Joshua has gone on to achieve. And yeah, I think Sean Murphy, who coached Anthony Joshua, has been sort of your coach over the years.
Mhm.
Was AJ still around at that time, sort of around Finchley ABC, or was he
Yeah,
up in Sheffield at the time?
at the time when I started, he was in the GB squad,
Yeah.
preparing for the Olympics. But he did used to come down every now and then. And I also want to add, obviously we had the likes of Derek Chisora, and at one point Shannon Courtney also boxed for Finchley ABC, and a few other top pros and amateurs. So I think a lot of champions have definitely come out of that gym.
Yeah, you say you sort of felt at home straight away? Did you pick the sport up pretty quickly? Did you find the sort of natural talent for it when you sort of got in the ring?
You know what? Essentially, it wasn't so easy. I mean, I've always been athletic, but I do remember really struggling to throw a straight right hand. It took me like a year, but once I got the 1-2 going, it was too easy, if that made sense. But other than that, I'm very versatile. I like challenges, and I'm generally always athletic and very competitive. So I would say that for the first year, it was quite difficult, but I stuck at it. And then after a year, I guess it became easier, but harder at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then you sort of got your amateur career going, started to do quite well, and then how far down the line was it that you then had the sort of health problems that came back? And just tell us a bit about when that first happened.
Yeah, it was weird because as an amateur, I only had about 30 fights. And, my coach, Sean Murphy, says that I should have had at least double, but I would put it down to my health problems that I had with hidradenitis suppurativa. which is, a skin disease which affects your sweat glands, predominantly your underarms, your groin area, and some people, unfortunately, all over their body. And that started about a few years into my boxing career. So I had my first fight in October 2012, and then I would say the HS started about late 2015, which was pretty much halfway through my amateur career because I boxed for Finchley between 2012 and 2019.
And the HS kind of came from nowhere, pretty much, didn't it? I remember you telling me about this before. It was sort of came from nowhere the first time that you found out about it.
Yeah, it was crazy because it actually took 2 years to be diagnosed. So initially, it started with just a boil, a cyst on my underarm, and it was a very small one. It was like the size of that, half my nail, and it didn't hurt or anything like that. But I went to see my GP because it wouldn't go after a few months, and then they just gave me some antibiotics, and that just kind of started making it get bigger and bigger every other day, to a point where it was like the size of a golf ball. And then I couldn't move my arm. Still then, I didn't think much of it. I just thought, it's just a pus-filled lump, I guess. Went to A&E. They told me I had to stay for an operation. Had the operation, and then even then, I just thought I'm gonna recover quick, in which I did 6 weeks. I was back in the gym, back studying. At the time, I was studying my A-levels. And then it kind of never went away. It just got progressively worse over the years. And then it wasn't until late 2016 that, a dermatologist told me you have this skin condition called HS. And I had never heard of it before. And in fact, when I tell people, in fact, 99 out of 100 people would have never heard of it as well. It's a very rare skin disease that only affects about 0.3% of the world population. And it goes undiagnosed a lot of the time. When I spoke to my surgeon after my third operation, she said that most people would take 6 years for them to be correctly diagnosed with HS. And, it has its stages, stage 1, 2, and 3. And I feel as though if I was diagnosed early on, I may have not suffered as much as I did. And, I'd see doctors so many times, yet they never really knew how to deal with it. And many said boxing was never going to happen anymore. Many said that I had to take very strong medication, which I did for about 3 seasons of my amateur career. I was taking up to 16 tablets a day at times, and they were very strong antibiotics. Two of my antibiotics, TB and HIV patients took that. And, that just shows how strong and how severe the skin disease can be.
Yeah, and I know you said before it was a tough one as well in terms of the sort of physical side of what involved with the operations, and you were sort of having to have a lot of dressings under your arms with the sort of the bleeding and things like that. It must have been, a real challenge going through not just your boxing career, but sort of everyday life at the time, I imagine.
Forget boxing for a moment. It was tough, man. It was so hard, honestly. Like, I remember even just sitting close to your friends, you're kind of insecure because you feel like, do you smell? Are you going to start bleeding? Are your dressings going to start, you know, leaking pus and all these fluids which kind of have an odorous smell to it. So then it just made me very uncomfortable within my body. I couldn't, the way I'm sitting down now, when I had HS, I'd have to put a pillow under my underarms just so that I can feel a little bit more comfortable. It made me feel very, very uncomfortable within my skin before anything else. And then in regards to sport, it was difficult at times because there's some days where you have multiple abscesses just formed overnight, and it's very painful. However, I would say due to adrenaline kicking in, once you've warmed up, the pain kind of, I would say, doesn't disappear, but you forget about it for that session. And then it's not until you've stopped training, you feel even more pain than you did before you went to training. But you know me, I held it down. I really love the sport that much, and I just generally don't give up. And there was a point where all the doctors I was seeing and dermatologists were saying, you can't you can't box anymore. You won't be able to box to a high level if you keep suffering from HS. And in fact, most doctors told me that it's likely that I'll suffer from HS for the rest of my life, which was very difficult to digest. But there was one point where I just thought, you know what? This is me for the rest of my life, having to wear dressings all the time, having to, I couldn't train in vests, had to wear, loose tops. There was times when, I was sparring or I was even hitting the pads in the ring, and then my dressings are falling on the ring canvas. And then, people looking at me like, what the hell was that? And, that in itself was also very embarrassing. And then, personal life, having a girlfriend or, a partner, having to explain to them what it is, and most people not understanding and thinking that it's an issue related to hygiene, or that, somewhat you're dirty and all those things. It's very difficult to deal with. And there was times when I was okay, but the majority of the time it made me very low, to just think about what I was going through. It was tough, and that's away from sport. Sport kind of gave me an escape, because when I go to the gym, as much as I'm in pain whilst warming up, once the adrenaline kicks in, once we get going, I completely forget about HS until I leave the gym. So, as much as it was physically tough to train and to box, suffering from HS, it also made me forget about it temporarily.
Yeah, and you say that a lot of people told you you wouldn't be able to box, and you were thinking you were going to be sort of dealing with it forever. What was the turning point in terms of the sort of treating it and getting it under control once it was diagnosed? When was the sort of turning point where you started to sort of get control over it and kind of move on from the worst parts?
So in 2018, I boxed in the London ABA Championships, and I lost to somebody that I knew I was better than. It was a very close fight, but I remember feeling very ill leading up to that fight, due to the amount of abscesses I kept on getting that were forming and then rupturing, you know, around, preparation for the fight. And after I lost that fight, my coach told me to take a week out the gym, as, he would. And then I said, you know what? I'm going to focus right now on literally ringing my GP, ringing them every day until they give me an appointment with a dermatologist. And then I did just that. They gave me the appointment, and it was September 2018 I got the appointment. You could imagine throughout the whole, from April 2018 to September 2018, I was ringing my GP every week. I said, please, like, something needs to be done. I need to see a dermatologist or, a skin specialist. And, when I had my appointment, the dermatologist said, listen, there's three options. You can take a jab once a week, and I think it's called Humira, or you can take something called Roaccutane, which is a very strong medication that's usually for people suffering from acne. And what that would have done for my HS was to dry out my skin completely. And, HS attacks your sweat glands, right? But she said that if I go down those two options, I can kiss goodbye to boxing at any level, because with the Roaccutane, it has huge mental effects as well as physical effects. And as for the jab, she said that I would be aching for a prolonged period of time. So therefore, there's a very slim chance I'll be able to compete at all. And then, that was like, damn. And then she said, you know what? We don't want you to take medication anymore. What you need to do is see this specialist plastic surgeon at the Royal Free Hospital called Barbara Jemick. And, she said that see her first. She's dealt with many HS patients before. See her, find out what she says, and then we'll have another appointment and we'll decide what we shall do from here. Because at the time I was taking 8 antibiotics a day, and it was just kind of holding down the HS. Sometimes it would get worse, but it wouldn't be so bad because I was taking the strong antibiotics every day. But bear in mind, those antibiotics I was taking were for TB and HIV patients. Do you understand what I'm saying? So psychologically, it messed me up, as well as it, times would make me sick to my stomach. I would feel tired all the time, and all those things. So when I did get the appointment with a plastic surgeon at the Royal Free, she just told me, you know what, it's a 50-50 operation, but I think you should do it. And for me, that gave me enough confidence. And I'm a risk taker. So 50% for me was better than doctors saying you won't be able to box again. Friends, family, same. There's no point, trying to pursue this boxing career because, look at you. You have to wear dressings all the time. You feel tired. There's times when you can't get up out of bed. So when she said 50%, that was like 100% to me, And she said, when do you want to have this operation? I said, as soon as possible. She booked me in November 8th, 2018, had the operation. And before I had the operation, she asked me, do you want to attack it one body part at a time? Because it actually affected me in 3 areas, not just my underarms. And I said, what's the difference? She said that if you attack it one body part at a time, it will take you longer to recover. However, it will be a lot easier. I said, do my whole body at the same time. And she said, well, you're going to wake up feeling like you got hit by a bus. And I said, it is what it is. Did the operation, and when I woke up, it's crazy. It was so crazy. One day I'll hopefully put some type of docu-film together, because I've actually, a lot of it was filmed on my phone. And, wow, I couldn't sit up. I couldn't go to the toilet. I couldn't brush my teeth I literally couldn't brush my own teeth for about 3 weeks, let alone wash my face, let alone I couldn't walk for about a week. And I remember when I finally properly woke up from my operation, I couldn't even hold my phone and type with the same hand. That's how much that third operation really affected me. However, it only took me about 3 months to recover. Whereas, that's a long time. However, considering my first operation, I recovered within 6 weeks. My second operation, it took me 8 months to recover. That for me was the toughest time of my life. So in a sense where we've had these 3 lockdowns, I feel as though this is my 6th time being here, because, I was basically confined to my bed 3 times before. And, if you add it all up, it was for longer than a year, 6 weeks, 8 months, 3 months. Therefore, lockdown 1 and 2 for me essentially were very easy. Lockdown 3 has also been not difficult, but, it's just made me think about, sorry, I'm going off topic, but it's really made me think that, wow, I'm definitely blessed. I'm grateful, to have my health restored more than anything else. I remember Christmas Eve 2016, I couldn't get out of my bed, and I had just won the London Novice Championships less than 8 weeks prior. And I remember praying and saying, God, why me? God, please give me a second chance, at being healthy again. And when I get that chance, I promise I'm going to go hard. I promise I would never allow myself to be lazy again. And then, fast forward now, we're sitting in a pandemic. I haven't had my pro debut yet. I've been signed with, Frank Warren for about coming up to a year. And as much as that's frustrating, the most important thing in these time periods is just being grateful for having our health, because it's, I can't believe it, but a year later, we're still in this situation.
Yeah, it's crazy how long it's gone on. But with so with the third operation, was it, you obviously woke up and you were in a really, really bad sort of place for a few weeks pain wise, but did the surgeons know as soon as you had the operation that it had worked, or was it a case of a waiting game then as well in terms of finding out if it had actually sort of solved the problem? Was it a waiting game, or did they know sort of straight away that the operation had been a success?
Um, it was okay. So when I woke up from the operation, I had huge dressings all over my body. They took the skin from my bum, on both sides, and a large amount. I mean, the size of my hand, really and truly,
Yeah.
on both sides. And then they replaced the skin. They literally removed my sweat glands in my underarms, replaced that skin with the skin from my bum, and you couldn't remove the dressings for a week. So, I was in bed, I couldn't move, I didn't know what it looked like. I was just stuck like this, literally. And then when they removed the dressings, I had someone film it. And that's the clip that I put out on Instagram. And it was at that moment that the doctors and the nurses looked at it and they said, okay, one side is doing very well. And the other side, the skin, which they actually stapled to me, had slipped. So meaning that, it could take longer to recover on one side. But then at the same time, Barbara Jemmett, the surgeon, she said, it's a 50-50 operation. You won't know whether the HS will continue or not until you're recovered to an extent. But to be fair, at that time, I didn't think about it like that. Once I had the operation and I saw, what it looked like, I was very shocked. But I was more so shocked that, wow, it looks like this, but I don't feel as bad as it looks, if that makes sense. However, I was on a lot of drugs in the hospital, so I didn't really feel too much. I actually spent my near enough 2 weeks in the hospital laughing and smiling all the time, which was very different to my first two operations. However, it was not easy. When I say I couldn't go to the toilet for a number two to poop for about, I had to literally save it to one day a week for about a month, because what would happen is, because the skin on my bum had been removed, if I move a certain type of way, I'd literally end up in the ambulance. And that was when I got home. And that actually happened. I remember crawling to the toilet and then, sitting down on the toilet seat. And then it was like one false movement and it's like your body goes in shock. And I remember just calling the ambulance. I couldn't make it back to my room. And it was only about 5 meters away. And, you know, two ambulance ladies had to come and get me. It was quite embarrassing because, I wasn't dressed. And, they had to kind of dress me. I didn't even finish doing my business on the toilet. And then I was like shocked because I'm like, damn, now I can't eat too much because I can't go to the toilet. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, and then on top of that, to weed, the hospital gave me this like wee pot, and then I literally had to lean to the side ever so slightly and, wee in that pot. And that was me for a month. I had to move back to my mum's house for her to look after me. My mum had to literally bathe me like I was a baby again. And, that was very difficult, because in hospital, it was all right. The nurses were coming to you every 20, 30 minutes. But once I got home, that's when it hit hard, like, damn, I've got to lay on this bed for 3 months or however long it's going to be. In my mind, I was thinking, okay, if my second operation took 8 months, I could be laid down for a year. Do you understand what I'm saying? But what was different this time is that I mentally prepared for this operation for a year. I knew I had never recovered from operation 1 or 2. So therefore, I was like, you know what? For a year straight, every day, I'm thinking about this operation that I need to have, that I didn't know what the operation was at the time. And I'm so glad I didn't know, because if I had seen the visuals that I put out on Instagram, if I had seen something like that from somebody else, you would have had to drag me to the hospital. You'd have to literally drug me to get me in that hospital bed, because I'm not doing it. However, I'll just really like to say that it looked and looks really bad. It wasn't easy, but it's definitely worth it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and do you think, looking back now, do you think going through, all those experiences kind of changed your perspective on life a little bit, made you sort of see things differently, and sort of, do you think it's changed you at all as a person going through all that?
100%. It's changed me so much. I appreciate sometimes, all the time, the simplest things in life now. Do you know how hard it is to hold in everything for a week just to go to the toilet once? Do you know how hard it is, or how frustrating it is to be unable to wash your face, your face, to brush your teeth? These are things that we take for granted. Like, ever since my operation, I actually enjoy brushing my teeth, because I remember the 2 weeks I couldn't, and I just felt so dirty. You could imagine it. The nurses didn't really brush my teeth. They never really washed my face for a week. I had to lay in my blood as well, and I was bleeding excessively in the hospital. It had to just dry up because they couldn't remove the dressings or change them. So when you go through that, everything else, in a sense, is easy. And going through those 3 operations, I was forced to learn to be patient. So that's why, in a sense, I've been pro for a year now. Haven't had my debut yet, but I'm patient, and I'm also just grateful. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because things could be a lot worse. I've been there. I remember what it was like to physically be unable to do some simple tasks. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, having said that, man, I'm just so grateful all the time. When I wash my face, I remember when I brush my teeth now, it's almost like a hobby for me now. Before, I used to, damn, I gotta go brush my teeth before I sleep. Now I'm trying to brush my teeth 2, 3, 4 times a day.
And what was the process of, like you say, you couldn't do the sort of simple tasks, you were sort of unable to do a lot of things for a long time. What was the process from that to then getting back in the boxing gym, and how long did it take until you were able to sort of ease yourself back into boxing again?
You know what? It was pretty weird, because before my operation, the surgeon said to me, I asked her, how long will it take for me to recover? She said 8 weeks. I said, nah, don't lie, please. Seriously, how long will it take to recover? She said about 8 weeks. In about 8 weeks, you'll be able to start exercising to a degree. She wasn't lying. 8 weeks later, within 6 weeks, my underarms recovered. It took a little bit longer for my bottom to recover, because what had happened was I just kept on bleeding out. So they had to keep changing the dressings, which kind of, every time you take them off, it was peeling a little bit of skin off, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So literally 8 weeks, I was fully recovered. The difference is I couldn't get straight back in the gym, because, my body became stiff. I became very lazy. I spent the 8 weeks watching everything on Netflix. And, you know, physically, it wasn't that hard. It was more so mentally, because, imagine laying down all day, every day for 2 months straight. And then my doctors said to me, you know what, give it another month for you to return to, boxing and training. So it took about 12 weeks for me to get back in the gym. And, in comparison to the video, I feel as though 12 weeks is a very quick turnover. you know, and it wasn't that difficult when I got back in the gym. I remember my doctor literally giving me the green light. I called my coach the very next day. I said, "Coach, we're back." And I was so nervous before my first training session because as much as I felt good, I didn't know how my body would respond. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I remember just being so anxious, being so nervous before my first session. And then when I hit the pads, I said, "Oh, wow, I feel good." And then it was weird because, obviously the timing was out and all those things. I wasn't fit, but I genuinely felt good. If somebody had come in the gym and watched me hit the pads, they'll just think, he's unfit. He hasn't been training. But they wouldn't think that I had the operation that I had, all till now. When I train, when I do anything, people wouldn't think that my body had been through what it went through. And in such a quick turnover as well. 3 months I was back in the gym. 4, 5, 6 months in, I was still, getting fit, but you would have never thought I had one operation, let alone 3 major operations.
And it's obviously been very delayed, but when it finally comes to your professional debut, I guess it'll be a pretty proud moment. How do you think you'll feel when you sort of walk into the ring for the first time after, everything you've been through?
You know what? Now that you say that, as you can see from the smile on my face, I'm so excited. I can't wait. I can't wait to really showcase my skills. I believe that I have a lot of natural talent, and I'm also a great student. I listen to what my coaches have to say. I'm always studying the sport of boxing. So essentially, the longer it takes, the better I'm just going to be. I'm staying ready. I'm always in the gym. I don't drink alcohol, never been drunk in my life, never taken any substances or any drugs. So it's like, generally speaking, I'm very healthy. And, can you imagine me winning the London Championships, taking 16 tablets a day, right? To completely healthy, no medication whatsoever, no issues with my health at all. I just feel like I'm going to be unstoppable once I get through those ropes. And once, in a sense, they let me out the cage and I get to showcase my skills on TV, I think that everybody will see, wow, he's going to be something big.